So, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Good morning. So happy to see everyone. Really excited about this conference this year. So, welcome everyone to our 2024 Juneteenth virtual conference. And this year, our theme is "And Also Loves Women, Purple, Pride, and the Pulpit." My name is Dr. Robin Aparicio. I am a minister here at Covenant Baptist United Church of Christ. I'm also the servant leader for Christian education, and CADI, our Christ African Theological Institute, is a part of my program. So I am excited, super glad that all of you have decided to tune in and see what we are talking about this morning, because we are talking about some good stuff this morning. I would like to welcome you officially on behalf of Dr. Lakeisha Harrison, who is our executive director of our CADI program, Christ African Theological Institute. And in her absence, I will be the host for today. We have a phenomenal lineup this morning. And in terms of the statement of the occasion, I want to just read to you what Dr. Harrison has indicated. Uh, it is in your booklet, so you will be able to see it. But she highlights something that I think really speaks to the occasion. She says, the Christ African Theological Institute of Covenant Baptist United Church of Christ is truly committed to survival and wholeness of the entire people. Our Juneteenth celebration is about the liberation of all people, be it locally or globally. Let us pray, dear friends, for an engaged dialogue that binds us closer together as one people under God's divine spirit. We endeavor to create a conference environment where the African and the American, the churched and the unchurched, white and Black, straight and LGBTQIA, young and the mature folks, women and men can come together in unity and in community. And that is what we are about this morning. This is, I believe, our fourth conference and our, I think, third that has been virtual. We had to be virtual in the past, and we decided to continue to be virtual because it allows us to reach globally in a way that we could not necessarily do if we were to have it in person. So thank you again for coming. And I would like to now introduce our pastor, who will bring us greetings so that we can kick off our conference. Our pastor is William T. Young IV. And he is, need I say, illustrious and willing to give us a greeting. So Pastor, take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Aparicio, all those very gracious words. But it's my pleasure to welcome all of you, those of you who are watching us live right now, either from Zoom or YouTube, and those who will be watching on the archival footage. Welcome to this uh, 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 new installment of our Juneteenth conference. The design of this conference through the ministry of the ChristAfrican Theological Institute is to build bridges with the African diaspora, with issues that parallel with our issues here in the United States. As most of you will know, Covenant is proudly an open and affirming congregation for 20 years now. We're celebrating 20 years since the decision of the congregation to become inclusive. And it is our vision now, 20 years later, to reach the world, to connect with the world, to build bridges with this liberating love of God. We are so honored beyond measure to have in a few moments the Reverend Dr. Canon Mfo Tutu van Firth, the second, only the second of the offspring of the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who have spoke to this conference. We welcome her, and of course, we as a congregation, we cherish greatly our connection to South Africa. A couple years ago, Dr. Alan Bozak, we were in conversation with him in this conference. And just recently, I was last month in Johannesburg for the Global Anti-Apartheid Conference on Palestine. And so we know that South Africa is still at the forefront of liberation, even in the 21st century. Indeed, South Africa is a force to be reckoned with in the world, as we've seen this year, just this year. So we look forward to hearing Canon Van Firth speak to us this morning. And then this afternoon, I hope that you will remain with us and tell somebody about it. Because this afternoon we have an organization called Rainbow Railroad, an organization that cares for and gives uh, asylum to LGBTQIA people all over the world who are fleeing from oppressive and homophobic regimes, particularly on the African continent. I had the privilege of hearing a presentation by them a few months ago, and we're so grateful that they agreed to come and speak to us. So, as Dr. Aparicio said, two incredible conversations that will be built on this day. And so I do hope that you will join us. Our speakers are no slouches. The subject matter is not to slouch with. Very important. So please join us and tell somebody again about what's going on online on this space. Again, thank you as well to the organizers of this conference, the ChristAfrican Institute team. Most of you will not know this, but there will be a bunch of people, I don't know how many, but a bunch of people behind the scenes working, pulling the strings to make this a success today. My kudos to them. Some of them have been working overnight, and we're grateful to have members of our congregation who are so dedicated and passionate about this work. So I hope that you will, in the course of the day, give them their props. Give them their props, give them their flowers while they can smell them, as well as giving props and thank yous and points of gratitude to our speakers on today. Fasten in your seatbelts, y'all. This is going to be not a bumpy ride. This is going to be a beautiful ride. So join us and invite somebody to join us on this train. Thank you very much. Welcome again.
Thank you, Pastor. So we are going to hit the ground running, as they say. As our agenda speaks to, we have an opening keynote session. And then this afternoon, as Pastor said, we hope you will return. We have an afternoon session from 1:30 to 3. The session this morning is from 10:30 to 12:30. So we are going to begin. I will introduce our moderator, and she will take it away. So our moderator is Reverend Melissa McQueen Simmons, and she has allowed me to read her bio, so I will share her bio with you. And it begins with a quote from her. It says, "I am a holy grounder because I need a faith experience that is fluid and radically inclusive, just as I was created to be." Reverend Melissa McQueen Simmons is a native of Greensboro, North Carolina, and a first-generation college grad. She is a mother to a fun and creative child, Camden McQueen Simmons, and the spouse to the beautiful and graceful Vondalyn McLean Simmons. She is a creative, an empath, an author, mystic, an Iraq veteran. Melissa was born into Generation X, the demographic cohort between baby boomers and millennials, just like me. She earned her Master's of Divinity with an emphasis in pastoral care from Howard University School of Divinity. Melissa is the spiritual director and virtual pastor for Holy Ground Spiritual Center. Melissa is ordained in the United Church of Christ and is currently pulpit supply for the Southern Conference, co-leader for the Racial Justice and Equity team, and member of worship committee at Holy Covenant United Church of Christ. She is also a facilitator for our Whole Lives, Lifespans Sexuality Education that fosters informed, responsible, and values-based decisions about sexual health and behavior. She is intentional about healthy relationships with self, others, and the divine of our understanding. She is committed to relationship building within the community. Melissa also leads the LGBTQ committee for the Charlotte Clergy Coalition for Justice. Melissa coordinates panel discussions relevant to social justice issues regarding the LGBT community and the Black church. She conducts necessary research on the Black church, community, and ongoing sources regarding biblical scholarship and sexuality. She also assists with helping pastors and religious leaders address social and theological oppositions in the Black community towards LGBT equality. She helps institutions create radically inclusive faith spaces. She practices various healing techniques. She believes in African religious traditions, religious pluralism, liberation theology, Black liberation theology, womanist theology, and mindfulness living. Her goal is to work with the oppressed and advocate for restorative justice in both church and community with the intentions to enforce God's inclusive love for all of creation. Melissa is a lover of international cuisine, travel, and music. She is a musician, singer, and loves expressing herself in drumming, dance, and expressive liturgical praise. Melissa says of herself, "As I continue on my path to living authentically, I am committed to helping others do the same. I am initiating the change I want to see." And with that, you will hear next from our moderator, Reverend Melissa McQueen Simmons. Take it away, Melissa.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is an honor and pleasure to be here with you today. I am at home. So it feels great to be back with my Covenant Baptist UCC family. So welcome. And I have the absolute honor to introduce Reverend Canon Paul Tutu Van Firth as our speaker and our sharer today. So the Reverend Tutu Van Firth is an Episcopal priest, an artist, an author, an accomplished public speaker, and retreat facilitator. She has had many roles in nonprofit leadership. She was the founding executive director of the Desmond and Leah Tutu Legacy Foundation. She continues to work for environmental justice, human rights, and equal access to opportunity for all people without regard to race, class, or gender. With her wife, Marceline, she has established and is executive director of the Tutu Teach Foundation to enhance access to opportunity for women and girls. Okay. Reverend Tutu Van Firth and her wife live in the Netherlands. They have 4 children and 2 grandchildren. It is with much gratitude that I welcome the Reverend Canon Paul Tutu Van Firth to engage in dialogue for this Caddy Juneteenth virtual conference. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Reverend Melissa. And it's such a pleasure to be with you this morning and a pleasure to be with your virtual congregation gathered here. And so I'm really pleased to join with you today.
Wonderful. Thank you. So we have been given just gifted with this theme of, and also loves women, purple pride in the pulpit, which is inspired by our June Pride Month and the definition of Alice Walker's womanist, the original definition. So I actually pulled up some information, and I just wanted to share a little bit about this original definition. Okay. So let's see here. From womanish, a Black feminist or feminist of color, from the Black folk expression of mothers to female children. You acted womanish, a woman who loves other women sexually and or non-sexually, appreciates and prefers women's culture, women's emotional flexibility, and women's strength. Sometimes loves individual men sexually and or non-sexually, committed to survival and wholeness of entire people, male and female, loves music, loves dance, loves the moon, loves the spirit, loves love and food and roundness, loves struggle, loves the folk, love herself regardless. Womanist is to feminist as purple is to lavender. So you and I, we get to have a conversation about purple pride in the pulpit. So before we get into some things, I want our visitors and our guests to get to know a little bit about who you are. Tell us about your identity, your faith, sexual orientation, your gender expression, so viewers can get a glimpse of who you are.
Well, thank you for that invitation. I am Mpho Tutu van Firth. I am a South African. I identify in my heart as South African, and that identity has been really important to me because it has been a contested identity during the years of apartheid. The South African government of the time decided that Black South Africans weren't actually South Africans. We were citizens of some self-created what they called homelands. And so it's been really important to me to identify as South African, and I still retain that identity, even though I was born in England. I have grown up in South Africa, in the UK, in the US. I have lived in South Africa and Lesotho and Swaziland, and now in the Netherlands. And so I'm something of a nomadic being. I am married now to Marceline Tutu van Furth, who, because God has a really warped sense of humor, is Dutch, go figure.
I love it. I love it.
And together we have 4 children and 2 grandchildren. So the configuration is, I have 2 children from a previous marriage. She has 2 children from a previous marriage. I was married to the father of my children,
Mhm.
and who was someone who I loved. And as we know, adult relationships can be really challenging, and that they
Oh, yeah.
don't always hold together. And our relationship didn't hold together, but from it we have 2 gorgeous children, and now 2 amazing grandchildren. Um,
Beautiful.
and I am now in the process of planting an Episcopal church in Amsterdam. So the Episcopal Church is the American flavor of the Anglican Church, and so you'll find Anglican churches all over the world. Um, and in the Netherlands, the Anglican Church that existed here was under the under the UK, under the English version of the Anglican Church, which is not welcoming and affirming. And so there is a place here in the Netherlands for an expression
Mm.
of Anglicanism that is fully welcoming and affirming.
Wow. What a beautiful story and what a wonderful opportunity to
Mm.
bring that expression into that space with that history. I'm excited. I can't wait to hear more about that. So you have shared with us about your identity and your faith identity and your expression, how you live and love in this world. So since you have traveled all around the world, I'm curious to hear, what can you share about womanism? What does womanism mean to you and the intersections of your life?
Mm. Um, I um, I would say that having studied in the U.S. And so the major part of my theological study was in the U.S., and I did a Master's of Divinity at Episcopal Divinity School in Cambridge in Massachusetts when that still existed. It's now joined with Union Theological in New York. But anyway,
Okay.
um, and so the more academic womanism has been um, the African American woman's expression of feminism,
Mhm.
um, and that um, and and so my experience has been in the academic arena. The conversation is slightly different than the conversation that would be driven by the definition that you gave
Mhm.
earlier, than Alice Walker's definition, that is very embracing, should I say, that is very all encompassing and very fully affirming. And so what we've found in the conversations around feminism and womanism is that womanism has a very American cast to it, and a very American flavor. And for African Americans who have not traveled outside the United States, so I had the experience with my ex-husband of his coming to South Africa was the first time that he was on the African continent, was when we got when he traveled for our wedding, and our wedding was in Cape Town, but then we went to South Africa, to Soweto, which is, my family had then a home in Soweto. And I said, it was the first time seeing my ex-husband in South Africa was the first time I had an expression, an experience of seeing him as somebody with skin on. That there's a kind of vulnerability that the United States creates in African Americans. Honestly, for me as an outsider, and for me several years into being an outsider, there is I must admit that coming to the United States always gives me a slight sense of anxiety. Okay, how safe am I going to be as a person of color in that place? Not, is somebody going to am I going into a dangerous neighborhood? No, but I am going into a dangerous country. That this is a place that is not welcoming of Blackness. And so the sense that I had with my ex-husband in Soweto was that he was in a place where he was among Black people, and Black people were in the majority. And even though it was just a few years in post-apartheid, and in fact it was before our married wedding was before the first elections, the sense of being in a relatively safe place, that it's safe to be me. I can walk around as a Black person, and I'm among Black people, and it's okay. But the other side of that is that that for African Americans, leaving America is maybe the first experience they have of being American. That the emphasis is not on the African portion of that description, but is more on the American portion of that description. So in other parts of the world, African Americans are experienced first as being American, and then the African is the trailing piece of that identity. And so this was a really long answer to a really nice.
I'm enjoying this. We need that context. So yeah, take your time. We need all of this.
Okay, thank you. And so the conversation is in other parts of the world, in other parts of the African diaspora, that the experience of African American womanists is a very Western and very American and very you may not be the ones in power, but you're talking from the center of the empire, and things look different when you're sitting at the capital of the empire than things look when you're sitting in the hinterlands. And the conversations that you're having at the center of the empire are different than the conversations that you're having in the hinterlands. And so the one small piece is that very often womanism is described as um, woman forward, uh, but kind of can leave the men behind. And in much of the diaspora, the question is, how do we bring the men with us? If we don't want to define ourselves over and against the men in our society, regardless of our sexual identity. These are our fathers, brothers, sons, husbands. How do we describe a womanism that that builds them up as well as building us up?
Mm. I hear you. So I shared some snippets of Alice Walker's definition.
Mhm.
And let me tell you, it's more than that, everyone. I just picked a little bit from each section. And we can be very clear. There are so many definitions of womanist theology. I have books up here from Ain't I a Womanist Too? I got Making a Way Out of No Way. I got an introduction to womanist biblical interpretation. So yeah, there are so many. And I appreciate how you are sharing that this expression or expression of academia or expression of how those of us who identify as womanists express ourselves in America is different than how you all express yourself abroad. I'll say abroad. Is that okay? Is that inclusive? Okay, abroad. So I just want to ask a practical question. What does it look like if I visited South Africa or visited abroad and someone said they were a womanist? What does that look like? The practicality, the expression of that.
Yes, I think it is still a term and still an expression in work. Kind of we're still working this out.
Mm.
Even as much as, just from the description of your bookshelf, clearly we're still working this out.
Oh, yeah.
What does it mean? How are we able to be inclusive? What is it that we are seeing in our societies, wherever our societies are, that are what are we seeing that is able both to address our history, where we have come from, and we
Ah,
don't all come from the same places, and how do we describe where it is that we want to go? What does a society that is fully affirming and respectful of our dignity as women,
mm,
what does that even look like?
yeah.
And what does that look like for the men, the boys, the men, the non-binary people in
Mm,
our societies?
yes.
How do we ensure everyone's dignity? I know, for instance, that the issue of polygamy is one that is really fraught.
Mm,
Um, Kind of read through a Western lens, it is exploitative of women.
yeah.
But then, kind of read from a different perspective, this is the society in which I have grown up. that I am part of a larger family system that is organized in ways that are not necessarily the ways that Westerners would organize them. If you say to me that that I must end this polygamous expression of familyhood, then which wife is it who gets to stay, and what happens to the other wives? What happens to them uh, in terms of social standing? What happens to them in terms of economic resources? What happens to them in terms of how you manage childcare? That you know that the the uh, the lens with which we are examining all of the things that we examine cannot only be the lens of Western culture. And so there's a respectful question. How is this working for you? And what would you need in order for this to feel like a suitable, a dignified, a valid, a good way of being family?
I hear you. I also hear, as we are mindful that care and survival is going to always be the running theme when it comes to womanist theology and being womanist. I'm also hearing that there's an opportunity to be explicit or intentional about creating a definition, even in praxis, that is radically inclusive for our non-binary siblings. And I liked how you shared polygamy. And as you were sharing polygamy, what I was hearing, as I am mindful that relationships today have evolved. And I know I have siblings in our community that are into polyamory. And just as you were sharing about the care and what happens with, what does it look like, the tiers of the relationship, who's the ranking, if you will. I'm seeing siblings in our community embrace polyamory because they feel like, and they're able to love many people at once, kind of dismissing ranking, if you will, but just embracing a love of partner or partners. So that was what was ringing in my ear as you were sharing. And I like how you also said, we are still working it out. Theologians, scholars, pastors, preachers, those of us, people of the cloth, however you lead in faith and spirituality, we are still working it out when it comes to care for survival. As I mentioned, a few of the books of womanist theology, and you mentioned our history, and that just brings me to this week, because this week many of us celebrated and remembered our ancestors, and their official freedom from being enslaved with Juneteenth events. And I know you are where you are, and you have shared with us your identity. But what does Juneteenth mean to you? Or, yeah, I'm just curious.
Well, I lived in the US for long enough for that celebration to be something that was very visible and meaningful to me. And I am the mother of two African American children, so that has meaning for me in that in in that level.
Okay.
but you know, that is uh, an American celebration
Mm-hmm.
of a piece of American history. Here in the Netherlands, um, so you'll have to remember that in much of Europe, unlike in the Americas, much of Europe um, did not allow enslaved people,
Mm-hmm.
which is different than did not allow slavery. Did not allow enslaved people. So all of the enslavement happened somewhere else. It was
Mm.
only the riches that were derived from enslaving people that came to Europe. So, and particularly for places like the Netherlands, which describes the period of colonialism and enslavement as the golden age.
Mm.
And it was absolutely a golden age for them. They kind of went all over the world, massacred left, right, and center, moved people thither and yon to um, to to man their plantations, and and the 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 celebration here is called Ketikoti. And Ketikoti is the celebration of the liberation of the enslaved people in Suriname. Uh,
Mm.
and so there is a significant Surinamese population here in the Netherlands. And Ketikoti is something that is a celebration that is growing
Mm-hmm.
in visibility because, of course, well, not of course, but of course, um, uh, Dutch history um, talks about their great explorers, doesn't talk about what the great explorers did when they got where they were going.
Okay.
Was just, you know, they were amazing and they were navigators and they went there and they found the rest of the world and they came back with, you know, spices and riches and da da da. But
Mm-hmm.
you know, like no question about, well, so did these people give it to you? Like, how did that work? But okay. Um, and so as the Surinamese and other populations of people of color from other parts of the world have grown here in the Netherlands, there has been more of a reckoning with Dutch history,
Okay.
with kind of the side of Dutch history that is not quite so cute, as
Mm.
their history books would tell, uh,
Mm-hmm.
and 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 so the expression of Ketikoti and the experience of Ketikoti is also and the experience of enslavement um, for people of African descent in Suriname was very different than the experience of enslavement in the United States, because in the United States you'll have generations of people who who had been enslaved, who were
Mm-hmm.
the descendants of enslaved people, people who were born into enslavement, people who you know, kind of who can trace back. My great grandmother was an enslaved person, as was her mother before her. In Suriname, that was not the case. There were two populations of people in Suriname who were enslaved. Those who got off the boat and fled into the jungle and became what were essentially called the Maron people. They were people who, you know, as soon as they got off the boats, they got off and they ran. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and, and managed to create communities in the jungles of Suriname. And so when freedom came, there were those people, and then people who were first generation when liberation came. So they got off the boat. They lived maybe 5 to 10 years um, in in under enslavement, because basically the Dutch didn't uh, didn't want to create generations of enslaved people.
Mm-hmm.
It was, we're bringing you here to work you to death.
Got
So,
it.
right. So then there isn't a next generation, because you were worked to death and the next wave of people come in on the next set of ships. And so that was how enslavement worked in Suriname. So you don't have people who, the people who were enslaved and freed were the generation who were quote unquote fresh off the boat. They got off the boat. They had not worked for long enough to die.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
that was kind of the pattern. And so you also um, don't see the same kind of um, racial mixing as you would in the United States. So that in the United States you'll see people who part of their lineage traces back to um, uh, rape by the master.
Mm-hmm. I
In
hear you.
in
Hear
Suriname,
you.
that's not so. So it's it's
Mm-hmm.
it's a it's a it's a different experience and a different expression of, well, what does freedom mean to
Yeah.
us?
Yeah. Wow. I mean, such rich history, and I'm just clear that enslavement or the lack of freedom look different in so many different places, but mindful that it still creates trauma. It
Mm-hmm.
still creates um, an opportunity for healing and growth. And I was just looking at how I took some notes, and you said they ran to create communities and when freedom came. And I want to go back to what you said earlier about um, being in a place where you don't feel welcomed in your Blackness.
Mm-hmm.
And just grateful that we are able to see what freedom and liberation can mean as you and I are out and living and loving and serving in our full authentic selves. Um, what would liberation mean for our siblings, our LGBTQ plus folk around the world today? Um, or what could it look like? What does it look like, or what could it look like? You tell me. Because I'm mindful that, you know, some people may say we're free. Um,
and
and
and yet, yeah, and yet,
and yet,
yesterday we were celebrating an act of the Constitutional Court in Namibia that decided that anti-sodomy laws and laws that prohibited um, uh, sexual congress between people of the same sex were unconstitutional. Yesterday, yesterday, uh,
okay,
and in Uganda, still coming before the Ugandan Supreme Court is the the same kind of case. The Ugandan parliament voted most recently a really restrictive set of laws that actually threaten Ugandan LGBTQIA plus people with the death penalty for existing. Likewise, Ghana. So last week Thailand voted the a new marriage equality laws. So I mean, these are things that are happening this month right here, right now. The battle is still on. It is not over. And and so the one side of that is that please hold that very much in mind and in memory and in your heart, and also please do go and look online for places to support the organizations that are bringing these court cases. Court cases aren't won for free. Lawyers love them to death, but pro bono only goes so far. And so the need for money to support these cases is real. So that when I think about what would sorry, and then just two other things on that same little train track, which is so often what we are told is that LGBTQIA plus identity is a Western import, is a colonial influence, etc. And the reality is actually absolutely the opposite. Homophobia is the Western import. The reality is that homophobic laws and policies came in with the colonial powers. In almost every place in the world where you look, there is not just a tolerance for fluidity of gender identity, fluidity of sexual identity, but that fluid gender identity in particular is not just sanctioned. Very often in indigenous cultures it is honored. That people who are in native cultures, two-spirit, in Indian culture, hijra, in African cultures, other names for this
third gender, and
right. All of these things are absolutely known to us in our history and erased by colonialism. So that is one. And then the other is, when I think of what would it look like to have genuine freedom of gender identity and expression, and sexual congress with people who we love, with people who, where it is between consenting adults. I think it would look joyful. I think the thing that for me characterizes homophobia is such a miserable, I mean, it just is such a, a, a miserable expression.
Yeah.
It's, you know, how can I chop off my freedom to play?
Mm.
Uh, how do I refuse to let the full beauty and creativity of my being, how do I invisibilize that?
Mhm.
And I do that by putting on an emotional and intellectual straitjacket,
Mm.
um, and um, and trying to not only control and um, lace in myself. I mean, I that the I don't know if any of you saw Gone with the Wind, but I
It's
think
been a minute.
it's
But I
been
saw
more
it.
than a minute. I think I was 16, so 13 even maybe. So, but way back many centuries ago, before you were born. But there's a scene where the thingy is having her corset tightened,
Okay.
and it just it feels to me like the idea of um of 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 those who are um yeah who cannot love the rainbow,
Right. That
um
part.
is like, you know, it's like somebody like yanking on those corset strings and
Ah,
trying to make it so tight that they can't breathe.
yeah.
And that's,
Mhm.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
who wants that even?
Yeah. Yeah. It's saddening and it's sickening. And just hearing you share that, just mindful that there's just still so much work, there's so much work to do. And you mentioned how, um, even around the world. And for those of you all who want to be a part of this, just if you type in LGBTQ bans, I mean, even here, there are still issues with people who are transgender. They're attacking our transgender children and playing sports or lack thereof. Like there's so much that um, people are doing. And when you were sharing, I put diversity is erased by colonialism.
Mhm.
That really stuck with me because that's what it feels like some days, living here, just
Mhm.
trying to erase our history as Black people, people of color, or people of African descent, trying to erase our history of our LGBTQ plus siblings, trying to, as you mentioned, restrict the diversity
Mhm.
or constrict the diversity and just not allow the rainbow to be. And for me to, whenever anyone not allow you to live in your full authenticity, yeah, that for me is sin.
Yeah.
And I hate to move in that direction, but yeah, that is definitely a sin. So mindful of all these things happening, for those of us who call ourselves into to ministry and humanity, to speak up and show up for LGBTQ plus folks, our community, and our siblings. Describe the pulpit during this time and place. Um, you can describe your pulpit, or you can describe what the pulpit can look like for those of us who are trying to affirm our LGBTQ plus siblings from their places of faith.
Mhm. Mhm. Um, I think that that the gift we are given is the opportunity um, to help people to open their eyes
Mm,
and to see the world as God sees the world,
mm,
in all of its um, creative colorful, gorgeous joyfulness that,
Mhm.
you know, that God um, is all kinds of diversity. I mean, you know, you you say a leaf is green. Which leaf? Which shade of green?
Ah,
You know,
which season?
which season? I mean, okay, pick, go pick a green
Yeah.
leaf and you'll come back to me with a bag full of green leaves, and no two of them will be exactly the same color. No
Facts.
two of them will be exactly the same shape. No two of them will be exactly the same shade. There'll be this green on this side and another green on the other side, and they look like a riot when they're in a tree and the wind blows through them. And, you know, that is God. That, you know,
Oh
God
yeah.
not, you know, let me have it in shades of gray. God is this. And our pulpits are places where we can affirm the thisness of
Ah,
God, and affirm
mhm.
the God's people in all of their diverse beauty.
Yes.
That when we say each and every one of us is made in the image and likeness of God,
Mhm.
that we are exactly who God intended. We're exactly what God had in mind when God was busy with this creation.
Yeah.
Um, and we need to hear that. You know, our people need to hear that
Mm.
God intended you. You
Yeah.
were exactly what God had in mind.
Mhm.
Your way of loving is exactly the way God wants that love to be expressed, because your way of loving is absolutely unique to you. You
Mhm.
have a perfect way of loving that is just yours.
Yeah.
And God made you because that that particular way of being was missing in God's symphony.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, uh, that's the good news, everyone. You know, that is the good news. And if you didn't feel affirmed in that message, I affirm that the way you are, the way you look, the way you love is beautiful. And um whenever anyone tells you to not show up in how you live and how you love, that's not the spirit of God, and that's not the Holy Spirit, you know.
Mhm.
So yeah, this has been awesome. Um, so as we're sharing about this pulpit and pride and womanist theology across the world, as a Black Christian woman
Mhm.
ordained in this free society
Mhm.
that legally supports your right to love who you love,
Mhm.
um, how does it feel, or how would you um, show up even when you face challenges for living in the full intersections of who you are? I know you mentioned earlier that you have this emotional and intellectual straitjacket. For
Mhm.
some of us who don't have that intellectual straitjacket, um, and we're ordained and we're Christian and
Mhm.
we're doing this work, how do you stand in the midst of all the things that show up?
Mhm. You know, I have to say, I was really privileged. I was privileged to grow up in my parents' home. Um, I, um, Many people will know that my father um, has said that he would not go to a homophobic heaven and he could not worship a homophobic God and he would rather go to the other place.
Okay.
Uh, and people ask me, you know, did your father say that in the wake of my coming out? Was that, you know, did he say that after I came out? And I said, good heavens, no. That you know, my father was, for as long as I have known that LGBTQIA plus identity exists, my father has been outspoken in support. And in fact, when I mean, I remember as a teenager in the 1970s, in apartheid South Africa, living in Soweto, and my father coming home one day, really excited because he said he had just performed the blessing of an adoption. Um, and he said that the adoption would have been illegal on two counts. Number one was that the parents were two white men, were two gay white men, which in South Africa under apartheid, as you can imagine, was actually illegal. And then they were adopting a Black child, which in South Africa under apartheid was, of course, illegal. And you know, so the South African government were like, you know, there is nothing right with this picture. And my dad was like, well, there's nothing, I actually don't see anything wrong with this.
Wrong, right.
This is an expression of love and welcome and joy, and you know, why wouldn't I support it? Why, you know, why would I experience it as any kind of a challenge to my Christian faith? It's absolutely the most Christian thing I can do. And that was my dad in the 70s. When I came to my parents to say that I wanted to marry Marceline, my mother's reaction was, okay, so Marceline, are you going to take care of my grandchildren? And you know, Marceline said, yes, I will absolutely take care of your grandchildren as my own, da 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 da. And my mom was like, okay, well then that's fine. And my father's response was, well, my wife has spoken, I don't have anything else that I have to say. So that was, you know, that was the experience of my coming out to my parents. And so on the issue of sexuality, I never had a moment of doubt of whether or not this was, you know, where does this, is this a challenge to my faith? Is this a challenge to my spirituality? Is this a challenge to my religion? No. And then but
yeah, there is a but. I know the
there
but.
is a but. I was living in South Africa at the time. I was serving under license in the Diocese of Saldanha Bay. The bishops of the church in South Africa decided that I could no longer serve as a priest in the Anglican Church, which was ironic, because when my father first became Archbishop, he said there were three things that he wanted to see happen in his tenure. He wanted to see an end to apartheid. He wanted to see the ordination of women, which was not allowed prior to his tenure. He wanted to see the ordination of women, and he wanted to see full inclusion of LGBTQIA plus people in all aspects of the life of the church.
Yeah.
And you know, as I say, you know, people can say 2 out of 3 isn't bad. Yeah, 2 out of 3 isn't bad.
That's not the rainbow.
as long as you're willing to accept discrimination on some metric. It's like, oh yeah, no, it's okay. Well, if you discriminate on that one, that's okay, and the other ones are not okay to discriminate. And you know, for me, it really makes no difference whether you say you're discriminating on me on the against me on the basis of my race, you're discriminating against me on the basis of my gender, or you're discriminating against me on the basis of my sexual orientation. All of those things are me. And if you slam the door in my face for whichever reason, the door is still slammed in my face.
Yes. Yeah. That's it. That's it. That's it. I mean, the truth is sometimes there is a cost to living in our full and authentic selves. We do have a question to you, Rev. Let's see here. Are you ready?
Yes, I think so.
Okay. What can American womanists and church women learn from Africana womanism as framed by African woman theologians, i.e., Mother Mercy? I don't want to mess that word up. Oduyoye
Yeah, Oduyoye. Yeah.
and Mother Musa Dube.
Yeah. Well, I think that engaging in the conversation, just realizing that our contexts are not the same, and that womanism and Afro-womanism has shades of difference. That there are shades of difference between the two, and so allowing that that as American womanists, American womanists do not speak for all expressions of womanism, and likewise that women from other parts of the diaspora do not speak for all expressions. They speak for themselves. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, I mean, very clear that this womanist theology is going to evolve as we evolve in relationships and how we love, express ourselves, our sexual orientation, our romantic choice, the way we show up in spirit and energy. So yeah, thank you for that. So when we think about all of this, because we're always going back to care and community, in order for womanist theology to really, for me, be rooted in how I live is how I survive. So as I think about how those of us who are part of the very intersections of womanhood and in our LGBTQ plus community, how do us as women, those of us with she, her pronouns, stay authentic and stay healthy as a community and in community in order for us to survive?
I think that one of our deepest needs in community is to create safe spaces with each other, where is it that you go to lay your burdens down? Where is it that you go to weep? Where is it that you go to say, actually, I know I'm not supposed to feel no ways tired, but I'm kind of tired right now.
Yeah.
And have that be okay. Where is the space that you go to allow God to really give you rest? Because the world will come at you. and
Rest.
particularly, rest, and particularly in these places and spaces um, where we're so engaged in the struggle, um,
Hmm.
and so involved um, in in supporting others beyond our communities.
Hmm.
So I think that it's absolutely crucial, um, to to uh, to to create a community of safety for yourself.
Hmm.
Mm.
A space to rest, a space where you can just be in your tears, in your pain, in your joy, in your hopes, and your sorrows. Um, a safe space, a brave space to show up in the rainbow and the various intersections of who you are.
Mhm.
Um, so, Reverend, where do you rest? You know so much. I can only imagine what you carry around in the essence of who you are as you navigate this world. Where do you rest? Where do you find rest?
I do find rest at home.
Mm,
I do have friends um, who can hold my tears. uh,
mhm,
and I am so blessed and privileged. My mother is still alive, even though she lives in South Africa. But I get to go there every so often and collect a hug.
mm. How beautiful. How beautiful.
Yeah, indeed, indeed.
That's beautiful.
And also, remembering that the first thing to go into the schedule
Mm,
is prayer time.
mm,
So it's time for prayer and meditation, and then you build the rest of the schedule around that. Because
mhm.
often we kind of put prayer and meditation as the leftover, and there is usually no leftover. So
Yeah,
really, really putting that in first, um,
yeah.
can really make a difference in how fatigued you feel and how
How
much.
wonderful. How wonderful is that? That's just perfect to describe how we put things in praxis as we live the various intersections of us,
Mhm,
mindful that there are so many of us on this spectrum of our rainbow,
mhm,
and which reminds me, or which allows me to see that we have another question, um, and also loves women. The question is from Reverend Dr. Redor Stewart,
mhm,
brings to bear the current tension between cisgender women, both hetero and queer,
mhm,
and trans women.
mhm.
Is this the same tension evident with African women of LGBTQ plus dialogues? Is there a tension between cisgender, hetero, and queer and trans women?
I don't know. I don't know that um that that is as much an issue in African communities, and it may just be to do with visibility. What is the visibility of transgender women or gender non-binary women, or gender non-binary people,
Mhm,
um, and then um, you know, yeah, I mean, very often the issues um, are are couched as, I don't know what, some sort of a moral issue where it's really a power issue. Like
Mhm.
if you identify, if I accept that you are a woman, what does it mean for me in terms of where my power lies? Um, and and so I don't know that we've yet got to a really honest conversation, because I don't know that we've really yet unpacked the power dynamics that are embedded in the tension.
Mm. Yeah, that was a very good question, and that requires some work. It requires some of us to really dig deep in how we live out our ministry and how we show up for humanity, whether you are a faith leader or not. So that was a wonderful question, mindful that
Mhm.
this is the work that
Mhm.
we must continue to do. Um, and it takes me back to when you mentioned that all of us are still working it out, working out this womanist theology, working out how we show up in the fullness of ourselves, in the expression that has been given to us from the divine.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah.
You have shared so much with us, and I do want to ask a question, mindful that our ancestors and our angels and the prophets we follow and the divine of our understanding is always with us.
Mhm.
Um, as you live your life and navigate who you are
Mhm.
as a woman in ministry, living in your authentic self, does the legacy of your father impact your identity and how you show up and love and forgive? Because I know how you feel about forgiveness in this world. And after that, feel free to share anything else you would like to share.
Um, yeah, I'm really grateful for the legacy of my father, um, for the person he was, for the work that he did in the world. I am grateful and privileged to have been a part of some of his work, and to have been of an age where I could work alongside him um, for some of the way, and that's a privilege beyond measure. Um, and I I don't know all the ways that that legacy um, impacts me, lives in me, speaks through me, oozes out of my pores. Um, um, but I think it would be amazing if it wasn't a, um, a part of my identity.
Mm,
Uh, and a part of my story. I think um, when I travel and when I speak in various places in the world, there are so many people who have their Desmond Tutu story.
mhm,
Uh, and their experience with him, and whether they've met him or they never met him or whatever, but that there is something of him that they remember.
mhm,
And um and for me, that has been um a a real gift, because um it it's not only a legacy, but also has paved
mhm,
some ground for me. has made things easier for me in some aspects of my life. And so I'm really grateful for that.
That's wonderful. I felt all of that. And we actually have been graced with one more question that I must share with you.
Okay.
But that story, oh, it just warmed my heart. Warmed my heart. So the question is, Reverend Tutu Van Firth, thank you for your presence today. You mentioned that we may not be in power, but we sit at the center of empire. Can you elaborate on that idea, and how could we move better in spaces of liberation that are inclusive? We have pockets of fights for liberation.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I mean, I think that realization of the difference between sitting at the center of the empire, at the capital of the empire, and
Mhm.
sitting out in the hinterlands, and remembering that that resources flow to the center. And so part of the mindfulness that we're invited to is to hold in mind, keep in consideration, um, you know, what is it that came to us? Where did it come from? Um,
Mhm.
who is paying for it?
Mhm.
You know, uh, we see many uh, aspects of American life where there's you know, vast varieties of, you know, I don't know, walk down the shampoo aisle or the cereal
Mhm.
aisle or whatever it is, and um, and recognize that that vast array of some of everything doesn't come for free. It
Mhm.
gets, you know, and that the low price for whatever it is that's coming at a low price um, is paid for by an expense that is borne by someone elsewhere. So,
Mhm.
you know, we love our low gasoline prices, but our low gasoline prices are at the cost of whose, you know, whose freedom and whose resources. So it's that kind of awareness, because um, you know, part of the thing of sitting at the center of empire is that the temptation is to be lulled, is to, you know, be, my problem is so big and it is the only problem. Whereas if I kind of lift my head, that actually there are ways of forming alliances beyond our borders, to to support the well-being and flourishing of people in other parts of the world, but in ways that will also support the well-being and flourishing of people right where we are.
Mhm. Wonderful.
Mm.
Wonderful. I'm trying to check to see if there are any more questions, and I'm so glad you were able to articulate that power and being at the center of empire, mindful that we have people who just want to be in power,
Mm.
and sometimes, most times, it affect others, and at what cost? It look like there is one more question. I'm checking. I'm checking. Okay. I see that there's a question, everybody. I need some help. I do not see the last question. I got it. I got it. Thank you for your patience, everyone.
Mhm.
So, Reverend,
Mhm.
can you leave us with a favorite liberation text to preach?
Mm. So The thing that we have in the Episcopal Church is a lectionary. And the lectionary is a fixed cycle of readings that you have going all the way through the year. And so we don't get to pick the text that you're preaching. It is, here is the text for this Sunday, and you're going to preach it. The gift of that is that you come to learn that every text has the capacity to be a liberative text. And so sometimes just that discipline of being bound by the lectionary in terms of what it is that you have to preach from is you learn that every text is good news, and then you just have to figure out, okay, so how is this good news, and for whom is it good news?
I love it. I love it. Yes. That's it. Nothing like following the lectionary. Nothing like it. We usually follow the lectionary in UCC too.
Yeah.
So we have another question from our wonderful guest. I am a light-skinned woman from the USA. I am considered Black here. In Africa, they call me a white lady. I thought I was going to be embraced when I went to Africa and was not. Help me. Who am I really? Mm.
So there's a question that goes alongside that, and that was where in Africa were you? Is the first question, because that's just not it's not a universal experience.
Ah, I hear
So,
you.
you know, in South Africa, people of color kind of run the gamut of colors, and particularly in Cape Town,
Mhm.
where there is what was called the colored community, is people of very mixed heritage of African, Indian, Malay, and white backgrounds, and so that you would very likely come across somebody who looks exactly like you,
Mm.
who who is then, you know, kind of very clearly seen as a person of color, and, and that's just one. Um, and then the second is to actually answer the question, who are you? You are a child of God,
Mm.
made in the image and likeness of God. You are exactly who God has put you on this good earth to be. And however it is that you want to identify, that is who you are.
Amen. Amen. So I am just so full, um, being able to share space with you today and hear your wisdom, um, and this just wonderful, affirming conversation. And is there anything else you would like to share
No,
before
just
we?
my great gratitude for the opportunity to be with you today and to share with you today, and I feel blessed and better than blessed for having been with you. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. So thank you for sharing with us this morning. And I hope that our guests and our listeners and those of you who spent time with us today to listen to this powerful conversation is able to feel unashamed, unapologetic for who you are, created in the divine, and that you're able to share your part of the rainbow with this world, and especially affirm our women and those who identify as women, cisgender women, our queer women, our transgender women, mindful that women is also a rainbow of beautiful, feminine, divine spirit and energy in this world. And for those of you who affirm all of us, we thank you. And as Reverend mentioned, there's always work to do. So continue to get online and do the research and pay attention to the LGBTQ plus bands you see, and continue to support us Black women in this movement and in ministry, and those of us who express our gifts and expression for the survival of our community and humanity. And thank you. And I have been blessed. And I am going to bring back Dr. Robin to the space. And she will guide us through our next steps. So blessings to you.
Blessings to you.
Thank you both so much. My heart is full. And I just thank you both for your outpouring of your experiences, your knowledge. We are better for it. So thank you so much, Reverend Cannon Mufo Tutu Von Forth. And thank you so much, Reverend Melissa McQueen Simmons, for coming our way this morning and enhancing our Juneteenth celebration. Thank you so much. And for everyone else, we're going to take a break. But before we take a break, there are just a few housekeeping things to keep in mind. One, we will be back here for our second panel at 1:30. So you get a chance to, get a chance to get a little nosh. And then we will move forward with that. Some of you may be dropping off, and so this is an opportunity for you to seed into our ministry. So there will be a QR code presently, and we invite you to give. This is a conference that is free for you, but there are a lot of logistics and things, and so we're asking people to please give and to give generously to the ministry. So the QR code is coming up. We thank again for this conversation that we had this morning. It really kicked off quite well. What we're thinking about in this expansive view of Juneteenth. And so we learned a lot. I was taking so many notes. One of the things I took a note was, we need people to hear that God intended you, full stop. Your way of loving is unique to you as God has intended, full stop. So the richness that we have received just this morning has been so much. Feel free to put things in the chat. If there was something that really caught you, put that in the chat. And then when we return back from our lunch break, we're going to hit the ground again with some a phenomenal panel led by Lisa Dunson and our moderator, Reverend Alexander. Our keynote speaker will be, that's for Sunday, Kendra Firth. But please, please, please come back. Our conference has not ended. So we're just going to take a break. It is 12:14 going on 12:15. So stretch your legs, get your water, get your refreshments. Tell a friend that we are on fire here. And please come back at 1:30 for the second part of our Juneteenth